Hello, 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 ChangeNOW. Or hello. Hello. There we go. I knew there were people out there. How are you doing? Welcome to the sauna. You'll be feeling, if you think you're feeling it, imagine what it's like for us up here. This session here is all about, wait for it, regenerative agriculture. It's a bit of a mouthful. Every time I say it, my tongue wants to get somewhat twisted, but we're going to make this happen today. As we know, civilization's growth goes hand in hand with evolving our farming systems. And regenerative agriculture plays a central role in supporting us all in solving some of the world's most pressing issues. Those issues being climate change, food security, social welfare, and ecosystems. In this section, we're going to look at 3 different kind of directions of regenerative agriculture. First, we're going to have a look at a few solutions and look at, the possibilities of what we're able to resolve with regenerative agriculture. We're also going to look at training and certification. What is regenerative agriculture? How do we train people to do it? Are there certifications? We'll be exploring that. And then for the third section, we're going to stop looking on land and have a look at regenerative agriculture at the bottom of the oceans. So it's going to be quite a plethora of conversations today. Some of our speakers are here live in the room, others are joining us remotely. Our chairs are awkwardly close to keep us out of the sun. Is that okay? We're going to be very good friends by the end of this. So our opening session, first let's talk about some leading examples of what the transition of regenerative agriculture. So first up, we've got responsible for overseeing the Moët Hennessy sustainability strategy for the 25 wine and spirits maison and implementing the CSR initiatives worldwide in all markets, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Moët Hennessy. Please welcome Sandrine Sommer to the stage. Check you out, Chica. We've also got, make yourself comfortable, darling. Hopefully that's out of the sun enough for you. We've also got joining us remotely a regenerative agribusiness expert and founder of reNature, a Forbes 30 under 30, and a TEDx speaker. TEDx is worth a watch, by the way. I did have a good watch of it before we did this. On a mission to use agroforestry with the goal to regenerate 1 million hectares of land by the year 2030. Please welcome Felipe Villela. Hello.
Hello, guys.
So, both of your businesses are doing somewhat different things, and I kind of feel like in this space it's always worth starting with a little bit of clarification about what you're actually doing in relation to regenerative agriculture. Sandrine, do you mind kicking us off? Because maybe some people are thinking, Moët Hennessy, what space are they in? What are they doing? So can you give us a little background?
Yeah, just a few words about Moët Hennessy. As you remember, this is a wine and spirit activity of LVMH. We have 25 maisons, brands, all over the world, and we have a sustainability program called Living Soil, Living Together. And one of the key issues in this program is regenerating soils. We are coming from soils. Our activity is clearly linked to the soils. This is the reason why regenerative agriculture is at the heart of our priority.
Fabulous. And Felipe, for people who haven't come across reNature before, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the space of regenerative agriculture?
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's great to see you, Lovelda, Sandrine, and the whole ChangeNOW community. I'm speaking from Brazil, and it's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, reNature is a Dutch-Brazilian organization working on mainstreaming regenerative agriculture across the globe. So what we do basically is supporting farmers, communities, and corporates in the transition towards a more regenerative agricultural system. So really focusing mostly on the global south, so Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, but also doing a few projects in Europe. But we are really supporting the scalability and the replicability of regenerative agriculture to really show there is a business case behind also all the environmental and social impacts of regenerative.
Fantastic. I kind of want to make sure that we're all on the... I'm going to turn my chair around a little bit because I feel like I'm not looking at you guys over the side here. I don't want you feeling left out. I kind of want to make sure that we're all on a level playing field here because there's a lot of words flown about in the world of sustainability in particular, and they have different meanings for different people. So can we just clarify, when we're talking about regenerative agriculture, what is it, Felipe?
Perfect. Absolutely, Lovelda. You know, there's a lot of different taxonomies and naming around different agricultural practices. And regenerative agriculture really embrace multiple practices such as agroforestry, silvopasture, agroecology, and many others that are basically with the same end goal of regenerating the soil and bringing more climate resilience for farmers, you know. So it's about building soil health, increasing biodiversity, and really maximizing the positive outcomes from landscape interventions. So as you see, like last year, we had 30% yield decrease on coffee farming in Brazil because of intensive frost. And farmers are seeing that regenerative practices is a very effective way for us to build climate resilience against these extreme weather events we're facing across the globe.
Super. Sandrine, would you add to that? What do you see regenerative agriculture like from Moët Hennessy's perspective?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think it's very important, you know, we have already what we call sustainable viticulture. So first, we have to reduce our environmental impact. And we are already done that, of course, within our own vineyard with environmental certification. This is, I would say, the first step. And of course, we have to go further. And to go further means regenerative agriculture, to place the soils, the health of the soils, at the heart of our strategy and of our practices. So it means we have different way of these practices, different type of practices, and we will see, I'm sure, right later. It's not, regenerative agriculture is not one size fits all. It means you have to tailor-made your practices with the climate, of course, with the people, with the practices already existing, with the soils, the quality of the soils where you are. So you have really to adapt everything. And within regenerative agriculture, we mean for Moët Hennessy, cover cropping, we mean agroforestry, we mean agroecology, yes, Felipe, as you mentioned. Sometimes we mean organic or biodynamic. It depends, you know. But I think the main thing is to remind, this is to have the living soils, the best health of the soils.
So it's getting the best out of the soils, and there's multiple different ways of dealing with it. And you've touched on, Sandrine, you touched on something quite important there, which is when we talk about biodiversity. The climate is becoming the same in multiple places, different story, but it's not the same everywhere in the world. The soils aren't the same, the biodiversity is not the same. Can you, presumably therefore, when we talk about regenerative agriculture, it's not a single solution. It's not like a one size. It's not like we go and pick up a T-shirt in red and that's what it is. Can you speak a little bit more to some of the distinctions that we have to consider when it comes to actually doing this in real terms?
Yeah. Maybe to give you some concrete example within our maison. So we tested different practices, and for example, with reNature, with our Champagne brand, we tested agroforestry on 40 hectares, you know, with some hedges and trees all around the vineyard and cross the vineyard. For Galoupet, Château Galoupet, this is a new rosé we bought 2 years ago, and we have decided to switch into organic and some biodynamic parcel as well. So organic, and we will test as well cover cropping and agroforestry. In Cognac, quite the same with Hennessy, is one of our main spirit brand. And we test agroforestry as well, cover cropping as well. We have as well some eco-grazing, you know, some ships to ban herbicide in our own vineyard. So we test different practices with our brands. And the thing is, we have to measure everything. So, and we need some experts to do that. So we are working with different experts in order to find the best KPI, in order to monitor. And the thing is, thanks to these KPIs and to prove, you know, the good measure, we will, of course, involve our partners, our wine growers we are working with. So it's very important. I really insist on the measure, on the assessment, and so on. And for example, we are working with Felipe on the assessment with Chandon vineyard. You know, Chandon is a sparkling wine. And we have some vineyards all over the world. And with Felipe, we have assessed the gap, you know, between our practices and what we have to do in order to have better soils, living soils, and so on.
Super. Felipe, I'm sure you've got loads of additional examples as well. Can you maybe speak to some of the differences that you've done in different territories with climate? How do we even assess how we apply regenerative agriculture in a way that's helpful, given that we're looking at, so we're not working with the same soil in the same climate?
Absolutely, Lovelda. Indeed. So regenerative agriculture is super context-specific to that particular landscape and ecosystem. So it's difficult to make a recipe out of this, and it shouldn't, as it's complex as nature is. So, you know, when you try to put that in a package, it makes very inefficient when you try to do implementation on the ground with farmers that wants to implement regenerative agriculture. And a simple example is that regeneration is not only about agriculture, it's also about cultures. So regenerative cultures, which also is so different from each region. So if you're talking about Maasai communities interventions in Kenya with indigenous communities in the Amazon rainforest, there's a whole different kind of context that you cannot just come there and say, these are the practices, these are the principles, and this will get you to the desired outcomes. Because every landscape is different, every forest ecosystem. So I think in order for us to have an effective outcome, that's what Sandrine was saying, is measuring constantly the improvement on the interventions made, so that you can constantly learn and make better decisions over time, in terms of like using cover crops, in terms of using ecological hedgerows, in terms of using no-tillage practices, in terms of transitioning from chemical to biological inputs, and even better, to plants that can provide the NPK that farmers need to fertilize and to bring natural pest control, and also to go beyond that and diversify and rotate their cultures so that you can bring more plant species diversity to the ecosystem.
I love that you spoke not only about what you're doing with the land, that, we're talking about the climate and how the soil is and all of that, but you also spoke about the cultures that you need to take into account as well, the people that make up those sorts of ecosystems, which gets me thinking, presumably you can't do regenerative agriculture in a bubble, in a vacuum. You can't just, as Moët at Hennessy, go, we're going to do this and let's tick a box. So who are the other stakeholders, if we can define them, like key groups of people that we need to consider if we're truly to go from fork to farm and have that kind of very regenerative agriculture kind of perspective? You mentioned partners earlier, Sandrine. What sort of people do you partner with, and who are those stakeholders?
Yeah, for sure. Partners, our wine growers, that's crucial. Scientists as well, because we have clearly to make the link between scientists and the field. So really to have R&D, and we have to, of course, involve all the value chain, our partners, till the end, the client. This is very important to explain everything to the client. what is regenerative agriculture, why it is good for the product and for the planet, of course. And this is exactly the reason why, because we have a lot of stakeholders, you know, to involve. We have decided to go further, and we have decided to create a new event, a forum dedicated to the living soil, the World Living Soils Forum. So it will be in 15 days. So no, it's clearly my reality, my actuality for the moment. And we have decided, you know, to invite all stakeholders around soil regeneration and protection of the ecosystem, to be sure to create, you know, the collective intelligence in order to go further. Because what we are convinced, we have to go collectively faster and further. So this is exactly the reason why we have decided to create the World Living Soils Forum, to be sure to create a community and to share best practice all over the world. Because we can't reinvent everything. There already exist a lot of nice initiatives all over the world, so we really want to implement all these initiatives thanks to this forum.
So the World Living Forum in 15 days is one place in which there's a community being created to allow for various different stakeholders to get involved. Felipe, from your perspective, are there key stakeholders that you think if these groups of people aren't involved, we can't truly do regenerative agriculture?
Absolutely, Lovelda, and I'm gladly going to be there at the World Living Soils Forum. I'm really excited for this event because it is bringing a community of scientists, experts, and practitioners working on building soil health. So this event is going to be also really fantastic to, you know, merge and make a coalition for fostering soil health. And indeed, like, there's a need for multiple stakeholders to get involved because you're talking from multiple ways. So, for example, we're working a lot with engaging the youth, the next generation of farmers who are also dropping the rural areas to move to urban environments where they are leaving their farming environment. So it's super important to engage with also academics and young people that can continue the succession of the family on the land. But also, we're talking about scientists, as Sandrine is saying, like it's measuring constant results and data on the farm to make improvements is super key. But also, you know, we should also be able to engage with stakeholders such as farmers in the region. How can we map the farmer community around that places where we're doing interventions so that these can dialogue with other farmers? Because the most effective way to scale regenerative agriculture is for farmers to see there is a business case behind it. And if they visit a farm and see with their own eyes that it works, then they really get inspired and they can replicate that across their farmers' operations. So there's multiple stakeholders needed for adapting regenerative agriculture to the future of our farming systems. In order for us to have a successful outcome, is to build these sort of like networks, such as the World Living Soils, that can merge all of these stakeholders in one place and make commitments together to multiply the impact.
Speaking of impact and results, I kind of want to know what can we've spoken about measuring, we've spoken about impact, we've spoken about potential results. Can you give us some examples? Like when regenerative agriculture works well, what can we expect? Felipe, what can we expect? I'm sure you've got loads of examples where you can give us maybe some data points.
Perfect. That's one of my favorite questions. Because, you know, there's so many benefits, but I'll simplify to 5 of them, okay? Majorly showing that there's, economic also impacts around like regenerative practices. So one is, we're talking about reducing the overall input costs that farmers have, such as the chemical inputs or even irrigation, to using plant species that can serve the needs of these external inputs. So you can plant like cover crops or even trees that can provide enough nutrients that will make less dependent on external inputs. Secondly, is also to diversify and rotate your system with other species so that you can have additional income from other crops. So, you know, using tree species, but also other economic species that can provide this diversification of income. The third one, and the most important, in my opinion, is the climate resilience gap. So, for example, we're working with Nespresso on regenerative coffee in Brazil, where a coffee farm that is producing conventional monoculture coffee was impacted by intensive frost last year and had a reduction of 30% yield decrease, while a neighboring farm in the same region producing regenerative coffee had 0% impact because of the intensive frost. So this climate resilience gap should also be counted for the whole overall business model of the farm. And the fourth one is the payment for ecosystem services with a high value in the market. So we're talking about better prices of the carbon because of the holistic impact the regenerative practice has, besides only looking at carbon, you know, with the carbon tunnel vision that we see. And the last and not least is also the potential to get premium prices in the market. Companies are willing and committing to pay 5 to 15 percent higher prices for products that come from regenerative sourcing. So all putting together, it makes a very attractive business case for farmers to adopt regenerative agriculture and be less resistant to the change.
I mean, you're selling the business case, I'm not going to lie. I mean, there's not much left in there. But from a large kind of corporate perspective, what wins are you seeing? You said that Sandrine, you said you've tested lots of different, you're in that kind of testing phase. Have you got any early data that suggests this isn't just about doing good for the planet, but it's actually also good for business?
For sure. But you know, this is a definition of sustainability. You have always to invent something which is economically viable, or if not, it's not sustainable. So for sure, we expect from some good result in terms of economic value, but exactly as Felipe explained, we will expect as well more biodiversity, you know, nature coming back within our vineyard, because you can imagine it's better to see a landscape with a lot of nature rather than only monoculture and only one type of culture. Secondly, it's good for climate, you know, because healthy soils, regenerative agriculture, you can capture more carbon, so it's good for climate. It's good for social aspect as well, you know, it's very important, but we need the future generation who will become farmer, agriculture, wine grower. And to do that, we have to be sure, you know, the livelihood, the condition of this job is better. You know, you have to work not 50, 60, 70 hours and you earn nothing. So I think it's very important not to forget the livelihood and the social economic aspect of the regenerative agriculture.
Mike, you've sold it to me. I could sit here and have this conversation with loads more examples for a lot longer, but we're out of time. So really quickly, how do people find out more? Sandrine, you mentioned the World Living Soils Forum. Can people still attend? How does that work?
In fact, we have a site, so we can follow all the content digitally, because everything will be in live streaming. So you can have a look on our site, and you can register on it, for sure.
Fantastic. And Felipe, how do people connect more with you and the work that you're doing at reNature?
Yeah, I think, you know, maybe not talking about reNature, but the best way to connect to what we're doing is like visit a farm, like go visit like a regenerative agriculture farm and get inspired and see that the huge potential that this has for us to really build a more regenerative future and for our to have a more abundance for our coming generations. So that's my say on that.
Fantastic. Thank you both for joining us. Sandrine, you'll be happy to get out of the sun for a moment. Felipe, thanks for joining us remotely as well.
Thank you so much, Lovelda.
Still sticking. So we heard a little bit about training and measuring, and our next session is really looking at how do you train and certify when we're talking about regenerative agriculture. I told you that word's a bit of a tongue twister, didn't I? I did warn you. So certification and training comes as two of the big challenges when we're in the process of implementing something new. Financing regenerative agriculture projects at scale, how on earth do we do this? Taking it from small scale to much larger scales. And the farmer becomes a very, very important part of this dialogue. So here to dive even more into this, we've got a speaker who's been in regeneration, has had regeneration as their mission, since she was first exposed to the harmful practices of industrial agriculture and the power of building a thriving food system since back in the 1990s. She's now the executive director of regenerative, blah, 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 told you that word gets me, of the you know what I mean, regenerative, there we go, Organic Alliance. Did tell you that word gets me, and she's overseeing the revolution of a certification program. Please welcome to the stage Elizabeth Whitlow. Super. Come and join us in the sauna.
I can't wait.
We're also going to be joined by a social entrepreneur and pioneer in the field of supply chain sustainability and insetting, founder and president of Pure Projet, certified B Corp that works with companies to achieve net zero climate goals through the development of positive impact projects via nature-based solutions. Please give a warm ChangeNOW round of applause for Tristan Lecomte. Make yourselves comfortable as you can. Consider it a stage and a sauna stroke sunbed at the same time. Hope you've got your factor 50 on. So we've mentioned a little bit about, we kind of touched on quite heavily actually in the last session about the importance of measuring. Why, from your perspective, Tristan, do you think it's important that we actually measure?
I think, hello everybody, very happy to be with you. I think it's very important to measure, first for the integrity of projects. There is a strong point about additionality. There is more and more offer in our space, as we see. We've been the pioneers of insetting via regenerative agriculture since 2008, mostly developing agroforestry projects within the supply chain of companies. And we see, for example, in the offer of planting trees, a lot of operators will propose you to plant a tree for 10 cents or $1. But you can't do a good job when you invest only 10 cents or $1 in a tree. You need to do a diagnostic first to follow it up and to measure. And why it's important? It's important to ensure that there is a real impact. So for integrity of the project, it's very important to measure. As well, to be certified. Our projects deliver carbon credits. That's how we get the funding from companies. And if we don't measure the impact, like how much carbon has been sequestered by the trees we planted, or by the REGAC practices we've developed, such as cover cropping, if you don't measure the soil organic carbon, then you don't know really what you've produced, so you can't sell. And as well, I think what is very important and more important now, for people who do quality projects, in our case, we try to maximize the social and environmental impacts of our project. So in that case, it's very important as well to measure not only carbon, but as well impact on soil, water, biodiversity, and livelihood. And for that, we believe a lot in third-party certifications. That's why we believe strongly into both the Vera standard or gold standard when you have to deliver carbon. And of course, when you talk about REGAC, you need to have the ROC certification, which give a third-party legitimacy on what you're doing. I think it's very key in a moment when there is a lot of interest and a lot of growing engagement for REGAC, but we have to frame it. What is it exactly? What is a serious project? And what does actually generate a credible impact that can be vetted by a third party?
Speaking of vetting by third parties, why do you think it is important to have that external verification and vetting?
Well, I've got a few things to say on that. But first,
how did I know?
Hi, everybody. Hello, hello. Thanks for coming to our session. How many of you in here are farmers?
There's one over there. Oh, we've got a few. We have a few.
We have a few.
Excellent.
Thank you. Support your local farmers. How many of you here eat? All of us. So 3 times a day, if we're lucky, we get to make a choice of where we put our dollars and what we support. So think about that when you shop and when you buy your food, because it really does matter. And I'll go back to your question here shortly. I just want to tell you a little bit about the Regenerative Organic Alliance. It was founded by Patagonia Company, Dr. Bronner's, and the Rodeo Institute. And so these 3 organizations came together and founded the Alliance to develop a new certification. And this is to basically create a very aspirational framework and standard for certification. Really, it is the highest standard for agriculture in the world. And we have piloted this around the world. We've tested it out in 2019 to 20. And in 2020, time of COVID, opened up for application. So it's been a little slow to start, as you can imagine. But what we have learned is that farmers can meet our standard. And it's really important to verify that somebody is doing that there's somebody on the ground to actually see the practices are being implemented. And this is to prevent greenwashing. And Patagonia is in business to save the home planet. That's their mission, and they mean it. They want to make sure that the claims that they're putting on their food or their apparel are meaningful, and that somebody has been out there to assess it. And so that is really why we can get deeper into the verification part later. But I would also say, just as far as measuring things, is if you're like, whatever you measure is going to be what matters, and we need to avoid reductive thinking. It's reductive thinking that got us into this place in the first place. So we want to always think of things in a very holistic way as well. It's important to measure carbon, but we want to look at many other things. And so we can get more into detail on that soon, as our wonderful moderator will surely do.
Don't set me up. I don't know if I'm wonderful yet. We'll let the people decide later. When it comes to training, because we're here to talk certification and training, are there challenges? I mean, farming is not new. It's been around since the dawn of people, really. And what we're asking people to do is farm differently. Farming has evolved, but when we're training people on yet a new way of farming, are there challenges with that?
Regenerative farming is actually not new. It's how we used to farm. It's applying indigenous thinking to the farm as a very holistic approach to a farm appropriate in its own context. So agriculture is, 10,000 years old. It's taken us 70 years to screw it up, folks, since we started with the Green Revolution and conventional industrial farming practices. It doesn't take much. There is a big effort currently because of how we now farm and how we measure things. We look at yield. If we're looking at yield and nothing else, then we're not going to be able to change our practices. We have to look at the impacts to everybody in that farming community. We have to look at the health of the soil, the water, the air, the workers, and all of these things. And the real expert on training farmers is sitting right here next to me, so I'm going to...
Tristan, what challenge have you found when it comes to training farmers?
But the challenge is that the conventional agriculture gives you very fast result and maximize your result on the short term, whereas RegAg, first, it's an effort, it's a mindset change, it's an investment, and you don't see the result overnight. It takes 2 to 3 years before you see your soil fertility coming back with more insect and more soil organic carbon. So it's an effort, it's a challenge, it's a risk. We work only with farmers who have, in general, 1 hectare of cultivated area. They earn €500 per year in developing countries. And so they depend, their life depends on their crop, so we can't play with it. That's why sometimes there is a bit of resistance, and we have to shift the farms progressively, maybe not try to turn the model overnight for 100% of the area. We do it very progressively. What is playing for us is that intensive agriculture shows its limits, and that it's in a deadlock, because when you use a chemical fertilizer, you degrade your soil progressively, you degrade your ecosystem, whereas when you replant trees, hedgerows, you have life coming back. We see in many fields, even in some forests, some water sources coming back, some animals, some pollinators, and increase in the productivity. The general mindset now is in favor as well, or believes, I think 60% of French people believe that we will be able to get rid of chemicals, which is true, because that's how we've been producing before World War II. But there was a mindset where we thought it's not possible. You may have seen Syngenta boss saying we have to stop organic agriculture because of the war in Ukraine. What kind of bullshit is that? Yep. So we really have to, thank you. We really have to help this shift of culture. But I think it's the same for farmers or for consumers, you know, to change our food habits, to change our habits, it's a big stake. If you follow Paris Agreement, we all have to reduce our emission by 80 to 90%. Who is ready to do that in the room? Who is actually doing that in the room, you know? So there is a huge shift to operate. I think we have to still give an open and very joyful image to environmentalism and RegAg, to be welcoming and to propose a narrative where we feel we're going to succeed instead of being into eco-anxiety and finding the difficulty. So that's what we bring to farmer, and progressively we manage to engage them all towards RegAg for their own benefit and the benefit of their community.
So what I'm hearing is it's not about an overnight switch. It's actually about something progressive in order to be able to get people on board. But here's the thing. Farmers are not known for having huge margins, right? So, and you're saying that this, that the benefits are longer term. So how do we counterbalance that? Like, how do we engage farmers whose margins are already tight to get involved with something that's going to have a longer term impact? You're both looking, going, don't ask me first, I don't know. Tristan's like, pick me!
Pick me!
As you want, Lisbeth.
I'm sure we both have a lot to say on this. He's going to have more of the data and examples from farms that he's worked with and that he's seen, but I can just add a couple things to that. First, of course, farmers are very risk averse because of those thin margins. Also, culturally, it's really challenging for one farmer to stand out as the person, as the farmer in the community when she starts doing organic farming and everybody says, she's crazy, why does she have all those weeds in the farm? So it's a really different approach, and farmers need to be brave and courageous to stand up and take that on. Once they do, they start to see the benefits. And the transition trough that we mentioned, the 3-year usually period of transitioning from conventional high yield to organic, more holistic, they are going to see all kinds of cost savings from reducing the fertility inputs, reduced need for pesticides, with increased premiums that they get from consumers like you who are going to support them, from brands who want to support them and are willing to pay premiums, sign long-term contracts, and engage in capacity building for those farmers. So there's many, many ways that farmers end up benefiting, but the one that the farmer sees the most is she sees that her soil, when it has more organic matter, is more resilient in time of flood and drought. 26% more, actually. So there's many benefits that come. That also the yields start to increase. Once you get those plants off of, it's like an opiate, it's like a heroin addict. Like once you get them off of the drugs and they get healthy again, they don't need that to feel good. They produce serotonin in their brain. Same with the plants. Healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy people.
Yeah, I totally subscribe to that. It's true that fair trade as well and organic in some case helps the farmers to bootstrap the change in practices. And in our case with Projet, we use carbon finance and we certify this project so that they can deliver carbon credits, so that companies are interested to buy them to offset their footprint, to show that they care for the environment and engage. And so we use carbon finance to help the farmers to plant the tree or shift to cover cropping, to mulching, to reducing the tillage, and to cover for this period where you need an investment. It's not only about the money, it's as well to have access to the good technical advice, because indeed, you've said, RegAg is the way we've always been produced. And if you go to Le Louvre or Musée d'Orsay, you will see that all the paintings are agroforestry. So it shows, it's a proof that this is where we're coming from, but now we have to reinvent these models. We have to make them more dynamic, more adapted, and to have access. There is very few people who have this knowledge, because at the agronomy school, they learn intensive agriculture. So we need much more training on, and to involve the teachers into teaching on RegAg. And then we have to support the access of farmers to the technicity and as well to the funds to be able to invest. And for that, carbon finance is a great lever, we think.
So we've spoken a lot about farmers, and so that kind of begs the question, is certification and training a farming problem, a farmer problem, or do we actually need to extend training and certification beyond it just being for farmers, Tristan?
Yeah, we have to train everybody, you, us, the companies. There is already permaculture, agroecology. What is REGAG then? For example, we talk about agroforestry and REGAG, but actually agroforestry is REGAG. So we have to make everybody aware of that. And as was said before, the best way, I think, to prove REGAG works is to talk about yield. And I will give you an example in Peru, for example, where we've been planting 5 million trees with cocoa and coffee farmers. In the same co-op, in the same area, those who have not developed agroforestry and who are in a degraded area, they produce 400 kilo of cocoa per hectare per year in average. And those who have adopted agroforestry and who are in an area where we do as well forest conservation, produce 800 up to a ton. So twice more with REGAG. This kind of proof of concept is the best way to convince everybody, both the companies who want to secure their procurement and the quality of their product. Here we talked about volumes, but the quality of a coffee as well is better when the grain is more dense, and to have a dense grain, you need a healthy soil. So REGAG allows you to keep good quality coffee and as well to secure the procurement of coffee and cocoa in the future. Frank Mars, the founder of Mars Company, says cocoa will be agroforestry or it won't be. As you know, cocoa comes mostly from Ivory Coast and Ghana. We develop a lot of projects there for all the coffee players. And indeed, why do they do that? Not only to offset their footprint, but to secure the future of their procurement. And we've seen that in many countries. So it's not only about increasing your yield or earning more, but it's about avoiding, given the climate change crisis, preparing the crops to be resilient to climate change extreme events. And for that, agroforestry and REGAG works better. You will never see a forest being totally destroyed by a storm, but you definitely see that on an intensive agricultural farm.
So the education really helps. What about certification? Is certification just for farmers, or should we be certifying beyond just the farming community?
Well, for sure it starts at the farm. We also work with brands to ensure that they're making valid claims and there's not a lot of greenwashing. With any new term, it becomes a buzzword. And in America, it may not be, I'm not hearing it quite as much here, but in the United States, we have Cargill and Walmart now claiming to be regenerative and aiming for regenerative supply chains. And that's a joke. They are the ones who caused this, put us in this place in many ways with massive industrial style farming. So really what we need to do is certify brands who are making the claims, but I agree completely with Tristan. It begins with all of us educating ourselves on how this system works and supporting it when you can in the market.
Do you have examples? Because Tristan, you've already shared a couple of examples of like where using regenerative agriculture has really given great examples. Have you got examples where certification has yielded really great effects for farmers or brands having had that in place?
We've already seen that in just the short time since we have been in existence. There's about 1,000 farmers in India, cotton farmers, who worked with Patagonia in our pilot project. They have had all manner of drought or monsoon and all manner of troubles, but yet those cotton farmers, the co-op that is working with Patagonia, has tripled. And we've gotten 6 new brands coming on, getting more and more cotton into regenerative organic. So that is a really good success case there. I would say directly like what I've seen on the ground. Another example is in the dairy sector. So the regenerative organic certified pillar, there's 3 pillars. There's soil health, animal welfare, and then social fairness, which we aren't even touching on today and we won't have time. But with the dairies in the US, we have very industrial-sized dairies. It's more like a huge feedlot. They bring organic feed. The cattle never get on grass, but they're ruminants. They are much better when they live on grass. The vet bills are really high on the conventional dairies. Regenerative organic dairies, they are grazing all the time. The vet bill has gone down. The feed bill has gone down. The milk tank has gone up, and the price they're getting, they're paid for the milk is higher because the quality of the milk is higher. There's more butter fat in the milk because the animals are eating on pasture and healthier. So,
I mean, there's a ton of examples there.
there
Tristan,
are so many. That's just two. Great. I could go into many more, but I won't.
Tristan, you gave us one earlier. I'm presuming you've probably got a bucket load of them. Do you have one or two more?
Yes, of course. For example, in Indonesia, when planting 10 avocado trees for a coffee farmer who has 1 hectare, you can double his revenue in 7 years. You see, it's a very outstanding. With SRI, system of rice intensification, where you reduce the level of water in the rice field, you can increase the yield by 20% and reduce the carbon footprint of the rice by 70%. With rice ducking as well, you can diversify the revenue of the farmer and increase your yield. In France, closer from us, by reducing the tillage and doing cover cropping, you can increase the yield and increase the quantity of soil carbon that you keep in the soil. So there is, like that, multiple examples across the world. Today with Projet, we plant in more than 40 countries. We do mostly agroforestry, but as well cover cropping, multi-cropping, composting, hedge grows. There is so many things to do and so many potential to value the economic, social, and environmental benefits of regenerative agriculture. And then there is even another layer. It's the consciousness level or the spiritual or cultural level about how you approach nature as a farmer. Yeah. Because intensive agriculture has meant for many just to become a machine or a worker and to consider agriculture as an extractivist activity. Whereas at first farmers were lovers of nature and lovers of their animals and of the work they were doing. And we've lost, both us consumers and farmers, this deeper connection with nature. And I think with labels like, with certification system like ROC, it's really to prove that you want to go the extra mile because you have this understanding that agriculture is about ecosystem management, about interdependence, and about replacing a more connected relation between man and nature. So there is something much deeper into what we are doing. Planting a tree is not just a piece of wood. It calls on first our origins. We were all climbing the trees not so long ago. And maybe we have to climb back the trees to reconnect with nature and have a longer-term vision, which will engage us into RegAg.
Love it. Can I add a comment?
Of course you can.
There's something I love so much is feedback we've gotten from our farmers as they've converted. Time and time again is that songbirds that were on the farm when their grandparents farmed have come back. And that they just have more fun. So I love it. Regenerative farmers have more fun. Yeah.
You've sold us on the benefits. So how do we scale this up? You're telling us there's so many benefits. I mean, it looks like it's just a win-win-win scenario, but how do we accelerate getting more regenerative farming, so that it becomes our standard? You've got ideas, haven't you?
It's happening. That's the coolest thing. It's happening, okay? First off, we have to think about policy levers. There's many levers we need to push and pull to change our systems and our systems thinking. But policy is certainly where it starts, because certainly what drives most policy for agriculture is a corporate influence. There is now in the CAP program here in Europe has aims of getting 25% agriculture, organic agriculture by 2030. We're doing similar moves in the US. So I think policy is one really important way that we need to continue to give that feedback to your government officials, because if they're the ones who own the government and the policies, then they're the ones, Syngenta, Monsanto, Bayer, are the ones who educate the farmers. And it's their resources that go to the children, and it's their resources that go through the farmer extension. So in order to expedite this, we need to really continue to push on policy. We need to push education for farmers and for consumers.
Speaking of education for farmers, how do we accelerate this, Tristan?
Yeah, it's true that for us, empowering the farmers over the project and emancipating them around that is key. It is important, as I feel it is their project and something sent from the top. So we do a lot of socialization, and then the projects are designed, developed, and managed by the farmers. And we just bring funds and technical advice paid by corporates who inset their footprint to these farmers. To scale up, to me, there is as well a very important element. It's first to do the proof of concept for each RegAg practice. There is more than 10 types of different RegAg practices. Show the proof of concept, engage the companies, but As I mentioned, we do insetting. It means we help companies to invest within their supply chain at the landscape level. But what we see is that what has to be invested is tremendous, and it's not necessarily the role of a company to invest in this transformation of the landscape. It's more a banker's work or financial world work. And we see more and more impact fund developing, and I think impact fund and the finance world will be key to leverage and multiplicate the spreading of RegAg by finding a model where you invest upfront what you need to shift the model, and then you can value the product better. So with the offtake, you can reinvest the investor. I think the finance world will be key to develop a RegAg at a scalable level. Yep.
Believe it or not, we're out of time. So sad. It's like whizzing by. Is it me? Is it just me, or are they going really quick? Okay, no, it's just me, apparently.
We're just talking too fast.
Yeah, apparently it's just me. Like, are we at the end already? How do people connect a little bit more? So if they want to find out more about certification and training, what's the best way for people to do that?
Just go to our website, is regenorganic.org. Got Insta, lots of posts on Instagram, and a newsletter that comes out once a month. So please sign up and feel free to reach out. Thank you.
And for us, pureprojet.com, pureprojet in French.com. And for those who are farmers who want to engage, there is as well many organizations in France, like Ferme d'Avenir, for example, who help farmers to engage and to train them. So there is a lot of materials available online.
Fantastic. Elizabeth, Tristan, thank you so much for joining. Give them both a warm round of applause. Now, which of these chairs do you think has the least amount of sun on it? Because I've been on that one for a while, and our next speaker is zooming in. So just by way, is it this chair? No. Okay. This one over here. I'm sitting over here for the next session. Thank you. You're right, you know. I've been in the sun like some sort of crazy person the last little while. I did tell you the final session here, we were going to take the notion of regenerative agriculture, and we were going to look in the ocean for some solutions. Because it's not just about the soil. The ocean is actually a very unexpected resource for restorative farming. Our next speaker could not come from a less environmentalist or scientific background. He was actually a high school dropout who became a fisherman, who's then gone on to start applying regenerative agricultural practices to the ocean. Please give a warm round of applause to Bren Smith. Oh, thank you. Bren, is it hot where you are?
No, it's actually a bit chilly. It's nice.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
We're state not being impacted by climate change in the whole globe, I think.
We're experiencing the effects of climate change here right now. So for many people who are less familiar with this idea of ocean farming, and perhaps maybe it's the first time they've come across it, they thought this session was going to be all about soil. Can you describe to us what ocean farming is?
Sure. First of all, absolute honor to be here. Ocean farming in general goes through, it comes from a lot of names. You know, there's aquaculture, there's mariculture. We just call it ocean farming in a really basic sense. And this definition is really growing any mix of three different crops, either fish, right, or shellfish, or seaweed. So you can think like salmon, you can think oysters, or you can think a crop like kelp. It's been around for thousands of years. The first ocean farmers were indigenous communities building clam walls. Thousands of years ago, there was an Irishman that got shipwrecked in France, and he became the first mussel farmer. And then fish farming's been really active in Hawaii to China for a long, long time. I think its modern form. So there are two models that have emerged. One is fin fish, right? Growing fish either on land or out in the ocean. And then the other one is regenerative ocean farming, which we're taking a deep dive into. And that's growing specifically shellfish and seaweeds, on 20 to 100 acres.
Okay, so now that we know what regenerative farming, what ocean farming is, why should we apply regenerative farming techniques to the ocean?
Sure. I mean, it starts with on land. I mean, our land-based food system's in crisis. Every farmer knows this, whether it's drought, wildfires, there's a nutrient crisis on land. And think about it like, you know, I go to farming conferences and farmers on land are saying there's a nutrient crisis. And I say, hey, I've got them all. They're all in the ocean, right? So I can collect them and get them back to you as a fertilizer. There's also rising seas, and rising seas is a terrifying thing, but as a calculating farmer, I just see more farmland for an ocean farmer. So it's time to sort of turn around and embrace the sea as a place to farm increasingly. And I mean, you know, as our food system gets pushed out to sea, our wild fisheries just can't bear that burden, right? We're already at an absolute peak fish at this point. So we're going to be farming the ocean in the future. The question is, what is it going to look like? Is it going to look like all the mistakes we made on land over the previous 50, 60 years, or can we build something beautiful and sort of do food right this time, but do it out in the ocean?
In practical terms, Bren, when we say ocean farming, or more to the point, regenerative ocean farming, how does it actually work?
So, I mean, I think the problem aquaculture made, so finfish farming made, and I've got lots of friends that grow fish, right? And they're on this amazing journey and they're trying to become sustainable. We start with a different question. Imagine if you're a land-based farmer and you could ask the question, right now in the era of climate change, what can we grow? And would you come up with the answer of cattle? Probably not, right? So we get to do that. We get to say, okay, what is unique about the ocean as an agricultural space? And what does it make sense to grow at this moment in history? And when you ask the ocean, what does it make sense to grow? It says, why don't you grow things that don't swim away, so you don't need cages and pens, and that you don't have to feed? The power of the ocean is we can grow things with no water, no fresh water, no fertilizer, no feed, making it zero inputs. And that's from a farmer perspective, that just means low overhead, right? Remember, the majority of fertilizer coming from it comes from Russia, that's used in the U.S. now. Like this global instability really has an effect on inputs. So the question is, it is hard to picture what we're doing underwater, but just imagine an underwater sort of scaffolding system, right? A garden where you've got anchors in the bottom, buoys up at the surface, and then you've got ropes. We call them lines when we're as fishermen, but lines in the water just below the surface, and then you use that rope scaffolding system to grow a mix of shellfish and seaweeds. And the idea is really, you know, so the kelp grows vertically downwards, and we've got rows of mussels and scallops, we've got oysters on the bottom, clams in the mud. And really, how do you take 20 acres and grow as many species as possible? I mean, Mother Nature abhors monoculture, and she attacks it. Like, there's not just environmental reasons for this. There are sort of cold calculating business reasons for this, which is Mother Nature attacks monoculture. She wants polyculture, so we have a crop for all seasons. And at the same time, that diversity allows us, if we have a crop failure, there are other markets we can tap into. I think the other principle of regenerative ocean farming is that is our design principles. Like, we design the farms not to be oaks, not to stand up against the storms, but rather to be willows, to bend when the storms come through and pop back up. And that flexibility and diversity allows for climate resilience for us.
You've painted a really beautiful picture for us. I can kind of see it, these like waving landscapes of farms in the ocean. How exactly is it combating climate change, which is really what we're here to talk about? Do you have some practical examples about how farming the ocean regeneratively, actually has a distinct, specific impact on climate change?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first of all, it's called regenerative because it's regenerative. Like, not only the zero input piece, but we're growing. So kelp, for example, is the sequoia of the sea, right? These are rainforests underwater. So we're soaking up incredible amount of carbon, nitrogen. We're rebuilding reefs. So all these different species, the ducks, the fish, the shrimp, the seals come to eat, hide, and thrive on our farms. And so we're breathing life back into the ocean. This is not about sustainability, making a bad thing better. This is actually about putting people to work, bringing our ecosystems back to life. That's one thing. The other thing is it's replicable, and this is really important in the era of climate change, is that we need things that are scalable through fast replication. So think of it as the nail salon model of the sea, where 20 acres of boat, $30,000 to $50,000, you can build your own farm. And that allows these farms to spread very, very fast and scale quickly. And then the other question is scaling impact. The World Bank did a study, and if you were to take less than 5% of waters in the US, you could produce the protein equivalent of 3 trillion McDonald's hamburgers. You create 50 million jobs, which is a stunning number, and offset the entire agricultural emissions of the state of California. So we want things that are small is beautiful, but they don't have to be sort of big corporate farms, but we want some things that have massive climate impact. One of the challenges with the climate movement, I think, is that we're stuck in the small is beautiful in the regenerative space, right? So we've got beautiful little gardens that aren't actually functioning as farms. The last thing I'd say about impact on climate change is that the cultural piece is huge and gets lost. Like, I don't want to just work for somebody, right? What I want is to have a self-directed life as a farmer, succeed and fail on my own terms, no boss, die on my boat one day is my metric of success. These jobs, right, of feeding the country, of building the country, of powering the country, these are soul-filling jobs, and they're the jobs we write songs about, right? So the question is, in the ag sector, can we create jobs that we're going to be writing and singing songs about an army of blue-collar innovation that happen out at sea? And the last thing I'd say, just about your specific question about impact, if you surround a shellfish farm with seaweed, you actually get something called the halo effect. Kelp is such a powerful technology. Acidification and carbon rates actually drop in the center of the farm versus outside. So it's like we think of all these like Elon Musk inventions. Like Mother Nature has some inventions that are probably way easier, more powerful, and more scalable.
You're really selling us on what Mother Nature naturally does, and I think sometimes we forget about it. I mean, the ocean, there's a lot of stuff I just don't think we know about the ocean. It's so big, it's so vast, and frankly, we have loads of stuff on Earth that keeps us very entertained and distracted, Netflix being one of them. But when it comes to commercial viability, because I think you're onto something here in terms of the impacts, there's a key here where we can unlock. How do we take what you're doing and this concept of ocean farming and make it, we can keep them, you know, lots of little small ones if we want to say small is beautiful, but how do we make it so we can have a greater impact? They don't necessarily need to be bigger, but scale the impact of ocean farming.
Yeah. Again, this idea, like we're caught between small is beautiful and big is necessary. And what we need is replication. So fast replication, think of it as the reef model, right? Where 50 farms in an area, processing hub, hatcheries, rings of entrepreneurs, and then you replicate that reef up and down the coast. And that's how you scale production, scale impact, and also scale community benefit, because it's horizontal, not vertical. It's not 3 white guys at the top collecting all the benefits through a vertically integrated corporation. So one is the replication. 2 is the commercial viability. A lot of it comes out of the zero input piece. Like anybody that is growing zero input food, as the climate economy comes in and raises the price of water, of fertilizer, of feed, any inputs, it's going to move our food to the center of the plate. So food growth in the ocean is going to be the most affordable food on the planet, right? So that is coming. We don't know how fast it is coming. GreenWave, my organization, which supports the replication and the scaling of regenerative ocean farming, we have something called the Seaweed Source, where we offer farmers forward contracts. We partner with different companies to forward contracts at the beginning of the season, so they know how much to grow. So that's been a very viable sort of mechanism to help farmers plan and scale. But the other thing is the power of kelp specifically. Shellfish is great because it's pre-packaged in the ocean, right? And then goes straight to market. That's excellent. Kelp is powerful because it's like the soy of the sea, but not evil. Meaning soy can be, the soy industry got together in the 1950s here in the US, and we're like, we're never going to get Americans to eat soy, so let's put it in everything. And the power of kelp is this whole leaf strategy where you can make your boutique products, your kelp mustards, for example. But we have got companies that are very successful in the plant-based sector, replacing soy with kelp, right? So kelp and mushroom burgers, a company like Akua. And then waste streams can be used for animal feed. If you feed pigs, for example, just kelp, you get a 30% reduction in methane output and better sow health. Kelp has been used for generations as a fertilizer. It collects phosphorus, micronutrients, all these sort of things. This idea of locally grown fertilizer, rather than from Russia, I think is a really powerful thing for architects, for urban designers, for land-based farmers that are looking for nutrients. So these are all sort of ways that we can there are many avenues, I think, of scale and commercial viability. The other one I didn't mention is there's a great company, and there's several, called Nopla in the UK, which is turning seaweeds into plastic alternatives. So again, don't think of kelp as kelp. Don't just think about kelp as food, but think of it as an unproblematic soy.
A bird has just flown in here, by the way, so if you see people, that pigeon better not fly. And he can't get out. He's just stuck. For anybody who's watching virtually, if you see people, oh, there he goes. Or she. Okay, you stay over there, birdie. Just don't move.
Careful. My first job when I was 14 on the boats, they gave me a shotgun to shoot as many seagulls as possible.
Okay, maybe we don't need that. We're going to let them the equivalent, humane animal equivalent, leave the building. Distracted me. So you've sold us on loads of the incredible ways that we can scale, and I love the notion when you said rather than thinking of scale as doing bigger, you can think of scale as replicating more, which I think is a really beautiful mindset shift. However, surely it's not all smooth sailings, and there must be some challenges to working in the ocean versus working on land. Could you maybe give us a little insight into some of the challenges that people face in this arena? Or am I wrong? Is it actually we're just missing a trick and it's super simple?
No, I mean, it's the stupidest place to grow food on earth, right? Meaning, like, it's the most volatile environment. I have zero control. I cannot control my soil. It turns over 1,000 times a day. I live at the whim of what the ocean wants to provide. I can't build a greenhouse or a hoop house, right? It is a really problematic place to grow. The thing is, it is sort of the ultimate regenerative piece of you're able to grow and breathe life back into the ocean and feed the planet and create a job. So first of all, it's like Mars and the ocean are the two hard places to grow. But that's why we need like something like GreenWave, which is a hive mind of thousands of farmers talking and sharing and innovating to deal with the volatility. What's interesting, I think, on land-based farmers are entering this time of volatility and loss of control that fishermen and ocean farmers face every day. And there are certain skill sets and business models that need to shape around volatility in order to move forward. So staying, at the same time, like staying ahead of that climate curve is really, really hard. Like our oceans are changing so fast. I'm going to be growing a different mix of crops in 10 years because of temperature changes, right? That keeps me up at night, and that's why our partners with the scientific community is so key. It's like just figuring out what the next thing is. The other thing is infrastructure. Like our working waterfronts have been taken over by tourists, right? The fish plants are hotels. And so we need working waterfronts and infrastructure. What's interesting on the water is like farming the water is great because it's cheap. There's no inputs. You don't have to fight gravity. It's just some anchors, buoys, and ropes, right? That's awesome. But you hit land, you hit all the problems land-based farmers hit, which is infrastructure. Land is capital intensive, low margin, complex activity. And we don't have that, right? And so I think that's a massive thing. The other thing is the investment community pretty much across the board is in total climate denial, we're all in climate denial in these micro ways. This isn't like Trump climate denial. We haven't looked at our own systems in our own businesses and be like, okay, what what are the implications of radical shift? Like, I can no longer be a conservationist as Greenpeace, because you could conserve the entire globe and it's still going to die, right? That's climate denial. So this climate denial in the investment community, that you can use a 20th century business model of 15% return in 6 years and an exit strategy. The idea that you could use that in the agriculture and the food sector in this time of volatility, you're just totally fooling yourself. So the challenge is capital coming together with climate solutions, with business models that are actually climate resilient, and all the language about sort of, not all of it. There are folks really trying, like they're great folks, but I think the venture capital space, which talks and is really trying, they're still stuck, like their accountants are still stuck in the 15% return, and they're still pitching sort of that model. So, for example, in food, what we need is loans, not investment. No farmer wants an investor, generally, like the farmers we deal with, because they don't want anybody owning part of the farm. That cultural identity, and the hardest part of farming is farming. It's not the money, right? And so what we need is low interest loans that de-risk things and allow us to scale, but keep our ownership over our lives and our agency, and allow us to do what we really do, grow food, rather than being like Pecker, you know, like the cubicle class calling up us every day with their ideas.
Bren, you've so totally convinced us that the challenges are worth it for the reward. For people who want to connect with you more, what's the best way of doing that? Because we're out of time.
Yeah. So one is, you know, we've launched the GreenWave Regenerative Ocean Farming Hub. It was amazing. In the first week, we had over 1,000 people sign up and go through our courses. We've got a waiting list of 8,000 people just in the US, request in 100 countries. So what we did was, just from all the farmers we know, from my experience of farming, we just open sourced the whole model. We've got 80 videos on there, how to, like seed to sale curriculum. And then next to that, we've got a farmer community. We've got the seaweed source. And we also, which I haven't talked about, is the Kelp Climate Fund, where we pay farmers directly, subsidize them to plant regenerative crops. So that's the hub. Go there, sign up, go meet folks and learn there. The other thing is, you know, this sounds small, but it has an impact. Like, get cooking, like change your own plate, move regenerative crops from the ocean to the center of your plate, get creative. And, you know, climate cuisine doesn't have to be like being force-fed cod liver oil. It can be beautiful. It can be delicious. Like, the climate story is one of negativity and burden. There are 10,000 plants in the ocean, hundreds of kind of shellfish. Like, this is the beginning of a new cuisine as we dive into the ocean. And, you know, that can be an awesome story instead of just eating, like, you know, just crappy tomatoes and soy-based products.
Thank you so much for joining us, Bren. Give him a warm round of applause. Oh, that brings us to the end of this session. I have never been so warm in my life. My name's Lovelda Vincenzi. This is my last session for today. I will be back tomorrow. I don't know if I'm in this room, but I will be dressed appropriately if I am. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you have any questions for anybody, we're here to help. Enjoy the rest of your change now. Thanks for joining us.